Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye urges the toughest possible international sanctions against North Korea for its recent nuclear test and repeats her call for lawmakers to promptly approve long-pending economy-related bills. A senior U.S. diplomat is in Seoul for talks on the international response to North Korea's latest provocation. South Korea and the U.S. want to get China on board for tough sanctions against the regime. Plus, China logs its slowest growth in 25 years in 2015. China's GDP grew 6.9%. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 19th of January. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us on this very cold day here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. And we start at the presidential office of Cheongwade, where President Park Geun-hye is calling for full-scale diplomatic efforts to devise stronger and more comprehensive UN sanctions against North Korea. At the third cabinet meeting of the year, the president said that if the international community does not impose effective and practical countermeasures against Pyongyang this time, the communist state may get the idea that it can continue to conduct nuclear tests. On domestic politics, the president also reiterated her call on Parliament to pass a slew of long-pending economy-related bills. She said this should be the year people feel the effects of the reforms outlined in her three-year economic innovation plan, and that the related bills must be implemented as soon as possible for that to happen. Staying with domestic politics, and the chairman of South Korea's main opposition party has announced that he will step down from his post amid the turmoil engulfing the party that has resulted in the departure of several of its members in recent weeks. Speaking at a press conference earlier today, Moon Jae-in said there is no reason for him to hold on to the position, adding that he will resign once the party's new leadership takes shape. Mr. Moon said he hopes his resignation will encourage lawmakers who are thinking about leaving to stay, uniting the party again. In regard to the general election in April, the outgoing party chief said he sees it as an opportunity for the Minju Party of Korea to regain control by uniting with other politicians and political blocs. He said through the election, the party will be able to heal the political divisions splitting the country. Now, the Chinese economy expanded at its slowest annual pace in a quarter of a century last year. China's GDP grew 6.9% in 2015, but that is still actually within the range of the Chinese government's target of 7%. For the last 3 months of 2015, China's GDP rose 6.8%, down from the 6.9% expansion recorded in the third quarter. The fourth quarter growth was also the weakest quarterly growth on record since early 2009, at the height of the global financial crisis. Analysts are predicting the world's second largest economy will slow down rather further this year, despite government measures to boost spending and cut interest rates. A senior U.S. diplomat is in Seoul as the two allies look to coordinate their response to North Korea's fourth nuclear test. The provocation has severely raised tension in the region, but South Korea and the U.S. know they'll need China's cooperation to ensure Pyongyang is punished in any meaningful way. Connie Kim has the details.
South Korea and the United States are still working on ways to persuade China that it's time North Korea be hit with the toughest sanctions yet in the wake of its recent nuclear test. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken is in Seoul on a two-day visit for talks with South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam. The officials are expected to discuss possible countermeasures against the North, including the details of a UN Security Council resolution that's already in the works. Following his talks in Seoul, Blinken will travel to Beijing on Wednesday for talks with Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Jiang Ye-sui. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will also visit China next week to pressure Beijing to join the other members of the six-party nuclear talks in punishing Pyongyang for its latest provocation. China has emphasized the need for an appropriate level of UN measures, while South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are pushing for stronger and comprehensive sanctions. The latest meetings come as South Korea's top nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk is set for talks in Moscow on Tuesday with his Russian counterpart Igor Morgulov. Russia has been calling for all interested parties to refrain from taking actions that could raise tensions in Northeast Asia. A South Korean government official says negotiations on a specific UN Security Council resolution on North Korea will proceed based on the series of talks between the six-party members. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, if you're watching us in Korea, you'll be well aware that we are experiencing some of the most severe winter weather so far this season. And what's worse is that the Arctic temperatures look set to stick around for the next several days at least. Our Oh Soo-young was brave enough to venture out, and she filed this report.
As we wade deeper into midwinter in Korea, we're feeling the kind of temperatures that chill you to the bone. In Seoul, the mercury started out at just minus 14 degrees Celsius on Tuesday morning, the coldest it's been this season. But with the biting wind, it felt more like minus 25 degrees Celsius for anyone unlucky or unfortunate enough to be outside.
I'm wearing lots of layers, but I'm so cold.
I think today is the coldest day ever.
I've put on 3 layers of clothing, but it's still freezing cold.
And the bad news is that it isn't going to get much better for the foreseeable future. Tuesday's afternoon high in the Korean capital will only top out at just minus 7. It's the first time this season that a cold wave warning has been issued in Seoul. Much of Korea's central region is also under a cold wave watch. Due to the intense cold, health authorities say 6 people have died from illnesses caused by sub-freezing temperatures. The mercury is forecast to stay well below zero through at least the middle of next week, when conditions should return to seasonal norms. So in the meantime, make sure you wrap up nice and warm in multiple layers and keep your eyes out for slippery patches on the street. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, the cold weather normally brings snow with it, but Seoul hasn't really seen more than just a few light flurries that didn't really stick to the ground. It's a different story in other parts of the country, though. Heavy snow has been falling along Korea's west coast and on Jeju Island's mountainous areas. A thick blanket of snow piled up in the southwest overnight, making roads rather treacherous. As you can see, Suncheon-gun County in North Jeolla Province recorded 19 centimeters, followed by Iksan City with around 16, and Naju City with 13 centimeters. Now, heavy snowfall watches remain in effect for both North and South Jeollado provinces and Jeju Island, where a whopping 70 centimeters of snow fell on Hallasan Mountain overnight. The nation's weather agency says up to 10 centimeters more snow is expected to fall on Tuesday, so drivers and pedestrians are urged to take extra care. Now, in economy-related news, Korea's producer prices were down 4% last year, and that marks the biggest yearly drop since 1990, and that is when related figures were first compiled. The Bank of Korea says plunging global oil and raw material prices led the slide. The price of Dubai crude, which Korea uses as its benchmark, had tumbled to the $30 a barrel level last month, and that's down sharply from the $50 plus level it was at in January 2015. Now, even after Korea was slammed by the Asian financial crisis in 1999, producer prices only dropped around 2% then. With producer prices a major indicator for consumer prices, it's widely forecast prices will remain low. Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors are on track to land in 4th place in global green car sales for 2015. According to industry data, the two Korean automakers sold nearly 74,000 eco-friendly vehicles last year. The sales figures include hybrids, electric, fuel cell and plug-in hybrid vehicles. Based on the January to November sales data available for major automakers, Hyundai and Kia are expected to climb up a notch to 4th with 66,000 vehicles. In the top 3 are Toyota, Honda and Renault-Nissan. The two Korean car makers are followed by Ford, which sold 63,000 vehicles. The rankings are unlikely to change when the December sales figures are added. The number of foreign visitors to Korea went down for the first time in 12 years last year due to the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome. The Korea Tourism Organization says just over 13.2 million tourists visited Korea in 2015, down nearly 7% from the previous year. The number of travelers rose about 10% in the first 5 months, but it plunged 40% from June to August when concerns over the outbreak were at their peak. MERS took the heaviest toll on the number of Chinese tourists, which declined over 2% throughout the whole of last year. Now, the number showed signs of recovery in September, and it rose 5% on year in October. That thanks to major discount events held by retailers and targeting foreign tourists. The number of outbound tourists, people leaving Korea for a vacation, rose by more than 20% to over 19 million in 2015. Thanks to cheaper airfares by low-cost carriers and longer than usual national holidays. North Korea's recent nuclear test is weighing heavily on the businesses operating at the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. Workers at the factory complex say the deterioration in inter-Korean relations has resulted in a huge drop in orders and driven new investors away as well. They say that although the complex is up and running, it will be hard for their businesses to survive if the situation continues as it is right now. The South Korean government has limited the number of workers allowed to enter the complex immediately following the nuclear test, which happened about 2 weeks ago now, which also barred any new buyers from entering as well. Now, currently, there are more than 120 South Korean firms operating in the complex with 53,000 North Korean workers. The UN Special Envoy on Human Rights in North Korea has condemned the country for its abduction of Japanese citizens. According to Japan-based Kyodo news agency on Monday, Mazuki Durisman said during a meeting in Tokyo with families of those kidnapped by the North that the disappearances were not just a tragedy, but a crime against humanity. The envoy called on North Korea to acknowledge that abductions have been undertaken by the state and said it should be held accountable for the human rights abuses. The statement comes amid deep frustration in Japan at the lack of progress since North Korea agreed to investigate the abductees issue in 2014. The North admitted to kidnapping 13 Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s, but Japan believes many more of its citizens have been abducted than officially recognized. The Special Envoy will report his findings and recommendations to the UN Human Rights Council in March. An Algerian asylum seeker has become the first person to be arrested in connection to the string of really awful sexual assaults on New Year's Eve in the German city of Cologne. Prosecutors in that country say the 26-year-old man who was arrested in the nearby town of Kerpen was accused of groping a woman and stealing her cell phone. 2 other asylum seekers, also from Algeria and in their 20s, were arrested on suspicion of robbery in connection to the December 31st attacks. In the almost 3 weeks since the incident, a total of 838 people have filed criminal complaints, including nearly 500 women alleging sexual assault. The sheer scale and seemingly organised nature of the crimes in Cologne has sparked a heated debate about Germany's approach to migration and asylum seekers, while over 1 million asylum seekers arrived in Germany last year alone. Now back here in Korea, and a recent study shows that slightly over 1% of the population in Korea is expected to live to or beyond the ripe old age of 100. The study also found some regional disparities in life expectancy, and this really highlights the need for policies to balance the socio-economic conditions in the country. Son Jung-in has the details.
A team of researchers led by Professor Kim Jong-in from Wonkwang University analyzed the life expectancy data from 114 districts nationwide, with the exception of the country's 7 major metropolitan cities. After comparing the data by Statistics Korea, the team found that 16 people in 1,000 who were 65 years old in 1975 lived to be 100 in 2010. By gender, 2.1% of women celebrated their 100th birthday that year, compared to 0.9% of men. The area with the longest life expectancy was the city of Uijeongbu in Gyeonggi-do Province, which had 115 centenarians out of 1,000 people. What was noticeable was that the areas with the most centenarians were generally located near the capital of Seoul, including Bucheon, Seongnam, Anyang, Goyang, and Suwon. And of the top 10 areas, 9 were in close proximity to the capital city. Some of the factors that contributed to the regional disparity included household income, size of the economically active population, and level of urbanization. Professor Kim also noted that factors like infrastructure, which can help determine how fast the district can respond to disease outbreaks, play a big role in helping residents live longer. The expert said the government should come up with measures to narrow the socioeconomic gap between regions by strengthening infrastructure investment for areas in need. The study was featured in the latest edition of the International Journal of Aging and Human Development. 손정인, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. And if you are watching us in Korea, do your best to stay warm. We'll be back with more news at 6 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.